A ringing phone, unanswered, is a torturous sound. But your husband's phone ringing from the next room, over and over, while he actively ignores it as you seize on the floor that isn't torture. It's a death sentence. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting against the one who swore to protect it, and I would not lose. My name is Alara, and I am a 32-year-old data analyst. From my small home office in Denver, I was fighting a deadline for AstraZeneca Solutions. The Kestrel project, my project, was supposed to be my breakthrough. That afternoon, it was just a looming tower of code and pressure. The familiar throb started behind my right eye. It was an unwelcome old friend, the one Marcus, my husband, always waved away. "It's just stress, Alara," he'd say, not looking up from his own screen. "You manifest these things." He was wrong. This was not the usual dull ache that signaled a migraine. This was different. A splinter of glass wasn't throbbing, it was twisting. My vision blurred, the lines of code on my monitor swimming into an unreadable gray soup. A wave of profound dizziness washed over me, a feeling so disorienting it felt like the floor was tilting beneath my chair. I pushed back, needing air, needing water. "Marcus!" I tried to call out, but my voice was a dry rasp. I stumbled from the office, aiming for the kitchen sink. I only made it 3 steps past the doorway before my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the cold kitchen tile. The impact was brutal, my shoulder and hip taking the brunt. The glass of water I'd been carrying shattered beside me, the water mixing with the grout, spreading in a dark, accusing puddle. I tasted something sharp and metallic, and realized I'd bitten the inside of my cheek. My phone. It had slipped from my pocket, landing just inches from my outstretched hand. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, fumbled with the screen. I hit Marcus's name. I could hear his phone ring. It wasn't far. It was in the next room, our spare bedroom he'd converted into his own office. He was in there, on one of his important conference calls that consumed his days. The ringing stopped, replaced by the synthesized politeness of his voicemail. "You've reached Marcus. Leave a message." My breath hitched. I pressed redial. Again, the cheerful, obnoxious tune echoed from beyond the wall. It rang 4 times, 5, then clicked. Voicemail. "Marcus, please," I whispered to the floor, to the spreading water. "Something is wrong," I called again. This time, I dragged my body an inch closer to the door, through the narrow crack. I could see him. He was sitting at his desk, his back mostly to me. His phone lit up on the desk beside his laptop. I saw his hand move. He glanced down at my name, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. Then, with a deliberate, casual swipe of his thumb, he silenced it. He declined the call. He turned back to his screen and continued talking, his voice a low, confident murmur. I strained my ears, listening for the other side of the conversation, for the tinny sound of a speakerphone or the formal cadence of a business meeting. There was nothing, just silence on the other end. He was talking to no one. A new kind of cold, far deeper than the tile, flooded my veins. It was terror. I tried to push myself up, to crawl to him, to bang on the door. My left leg wouldn't move. It was gone, a dead weight, completely unresponsive to my frantic mental commands. My left arm felt like it was submerged in concrete. This was not a migraine. This was not stress. The panic was a physical thing, suffocating me, tightening my chest until I could barely draw a breath. I was alone, 10 feet away from the man who had promised to love and protect me. He had looked at my call for help and swiped it away. My eyes darted around the kitchen, searching for anything. My gaze landed on the beige square of the security alarm panel by the back door. The panic button. A small, red circle painted with an ambulance. With my one good arm, I clawed at the tile, dragging my useless body across the floor. The broken glass sliced into my palm, but I barely felt it. It was a 5-foot journey that felt like a mile. My vision was tunneling, the edges of the room turning black. I reached the wall. I jammed my bloody thumb against the button, holding it down, praying it was sending a signal, praying it was reporting to someone, anyone, who wasn't in the next room. It felt like I was submerged in deep water, the silence absolute, broken only by the distant, muffled drone of Marcus's voice from the next room. Minutes passed, or maybe it was only seconds. Time had warped, stretching and compressing. Then, the silence exploded. A heavy, frantic pounding hammered against the front door. It wasn't the measured knock of authority. It was the sound of pure urgency, shaking the very walls. "Ilara," a man's voice yelled, loud and clear. "Ilara, it's Julian from apartment 302. I got a notification from the neighborhood security app. Your system sent out a medical alert. Are you okay?" I tried to scream, "Help." The only sound that left my throat was a wet, choking groan. My mouth wouldn't form the words. The pounding stopped. A brief pause. "Ilara, I'm coming in." There was a sound of impact, a heavy thud, and then the sharp, agonizing crack of the door jamb splintering. The door flew open, slamming against the interior wall. Julian, the neighbor I'd only exchanged polite nods with in the hallway, rushed in. I remembered someone mentioning he was a former firefighter. He took in the scene in less than a second, me on the floor, the shattered glass, the spreading puddle of water, my body unnaturally still. He didn't freeze. He didn't ask stupid questions. He was kneeling beside me instantly, his movements precise and economical. "My name is Julian," he said, his voice level, forcing calm into the chaos. "I'm trained for this. Can you hear me? Ilara." I managed a weak, desperate nod, my eyes wide. "Okay. Don't try to speak. Can you squeeze my fingers?" He put his hand in my right one, the one stained with blood from the glass. I squeezed, my grip feeble. He then moved to my left. "Now this one." I tried. I willed my fingers to move, to clutch, to do anything. Nothing. My left arm was a useless piece of meat. "Okay," he said, his eyes scanning my face, noting the pronounced droop on the left side, the way my eyelids sagged. "You're showing clear signs of a stroke. The ambulance is on the way. I'm going to call 911 right now and give them an update. All right, stay with me." He pulled out his phone and dialed, never taking his eyes off me. His voice was a stark contrast to the panic I felt. "This is Julian at 1550 East Colfax, apartment 302. I am with the patient from the medical alert. She is a 32-year-old female, conscious, but nonverbal with severe left-sided weakness and facial droop. Confirmed stroke symptoms. I am a former firefighter. What is your ETA?" It was this commotion, the splintering door, the loud, strange man's voice that finally breached Marcus's concentration. The door to the spare bedroom opened. Marcus emerged, not with concern, but with a face dark with irritation. He hadn't even looked down at me yet. His focus was entirely on Julian. "What the hell is all this noise?" he snapped, his voice sharp. "Who are you? I'm in the middle of a crucial meeting. Ilara, are you—" His tirade stopped when he finally lowered his gaze and saw me, crumpled on the kitchen floor. Julian didn't miss a beat. He looked up at Marcus, and the controlled calm in his eyes was replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated contempt. "She's having a stroke," he said, his voice flat and cold. "Where were you?" The transformation was instantaneous. The annoyance on Marcus's face evaporated, replaced by a flawless mask of theatrical panic. It was a performance worthy of an award. "Oh my God!" he gasped, rushing forward, fumbling as if he'd lost his balance. "Ilara, baby." What happened I didn't know. I didn't hear a thing. He dropped to his knees beside me, opposite Julian, grabbing my good hand, his skin cold and clammy against mine. "Baby, I was on a call. I had no idea, he whispered, his eyes wide and wet. The room was starting to tilt. The sound of distant sirens grew louder, merging with the ringing in my ears. I was fading, the edges of my vision blackening. But before I slipped under, I saw it. As Marcus leaned over me, whispering his frantic apologies, his other hand, shielded from Julian's view by my body, slipped into his shirt pocket. He pulled out his phone, the one I had called, the one I had seen him silence. With a swift, covert motion, he shoved it deep into the pocket of his jeans, burying the proof. He was hiding it. That was the last conscious thought I had. The image of my husband, his face a perfect picture of a grieving spouse, hiding the very tool he had used to condemn me. I woke up to the unnatural hum of fluorescence. The light was blinding, a sterile white square in the ceiling that pulsed every time I tried to blink. My tongue felt thick, a dry piece of cotton glued to the roof of my mouth. A rhythmic beeping came from my left, steady and indifferent. A woman in scrubs, her face kind but blurry, leaned into my field of vision. "Alara, welcome back. You're at Denver General. You had a transient ischemic attack, a TIA, a stroke." The word hung in the air, antiseptic and cold. "It was a serious one," she continued, checking the IV in my arm, "but you are incredibly lucky." "The man who found you, Julian," his quick response. A few more minutes, and we would likely be discussing permanent, significant damage. My eyes darted around the small cubicle of the emergency room. I saw him. Marcus. He was slumped in a hard plastic chair, his head in his hands, performing the role of the distraught husband. He must have sensed me watching, because his head snapped up. "Ilara." He rushed to my bedside, grasping my hand, my good right hand. His was freezing. "My God, you're awake. I was so scared. I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. I watched his face. His eyes were red, but the tears seemed forced. He looked exhausted, but it was the exhaustion of a man who had been caught, not a man who had been grieving. He kept glancing over his shoulder, toward the curtained doorway, as if expecting someone. I tried to speak. I needed to ask. "Why didn't you answer?" But my throat was raw, my lips cracked. Only a dry hiss escaped. He shushed me gently. "Don't try to talk, baby. The doctor said you need to rest. Just rest. I'm here." He was here. He was here now, but he wasn't there then. I remembered the red end call icon. I remembered him swiping me away. I closed my eyes, the image clearer than the sterile room around me. A nurse came in and told Marcus he needed to fill out some admissions paperwork. Something about insurance. He squeezed my hand again. "I'll be right back, I promise," and hurried out, seeming almost relieved to leave. The curtain rustled again. It wasn't Marcus. It was Julian. He looked out of place in the sterile environment, still in his jeans and t-shirt, his expression grim. He was holding my purse. "I figured you might need this," he said, his voice low, a stark contrast to Marcus's high-strung performance. He placed it on the small rolling table near the bed. He leaned in closer. "Ilara, I don't know how to say this, and I don't know how much you can understand right now. But I need to tell you what I saw." I stared at him, my heart starting to pound against the monitor's steady beat. "When the paramedics were loading you into the ambulance," he said, his voice barely audible. "Marcus was on the curb." He stepped away, behind the truck. He thought everyone was busy. Julian paused, his eyes locking onto mine, ensuring I was listening. "He made a phone call. I heard what he said. He didn't sound panicked. He sounded angry." My breath caught. "He said, 'The plan is screwed. The bitch is still alive.'" The world tilted. The fluorescent light, the beeping monitor, the smell of rubbing alcohol, it all dissolved into a single, terrifying point of clarity. It was not negligence. It was not an important meeting. He hadn't ignored my calls because he was busy. He had ignored my calls because he was waiting for me to die. Marcus wanted me dead. Julian must have seen the terror in my eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, cheap notepad and a pen, the kind from a hotel room. He placed them in my good hand. "Don't talk," he whispered fiercely. "Write. If you need anything. I don't trust him. I think he's watching you." I fumbled with the pen, my fingers still weak. I managed to scrawl one word, the letters jagged and uneven. Why I pushed the pad toward him. Why was he, a practical stranger, doing this? Julian's expression softened, but the anger underneath remained. "My older sister," he said, his voice thick. "She was married to a man like him, charming, smart. Everyone loved him. By the time we realized what he was, how he controlled her, it was almost too late. I recognized the signs, Ilara, the isolation, the excuses. I recognize it." The curtain swished open. Marcus was back, holding a sheaf of papers, his face arranged back into its mask of loving concern. "Okay, that's all settled. Baby." "How are you feeling?" Julian stepped back, giving him a curt nod. "Just wanted to drop off her purse. Glad she's awake." "Thank you," Marcus said, oozing gratitude. "Thank you so much. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "Yeah," Julian said, his eyes flat. "Me neither." He looked at me one last time, a look of warning and resolve, and then he was gone. Marcus sat back down, taking my hand. "It's okay, Ilara. I'm here now." I looked at him, at the man who had tried to murder me and was now holding my hand. The doctor said I was lucky, that I had a TIA. I knew my speech was slurred, my left side weak. I had a built-in excuse. I let my good hand go limp in his. I let my eyes lose focus, rolling them slightly as if struggling to track him. I tried to form his name, letting it come out as a garbled, frustrated groan. I used every ounce of my will to appear broken, confused, and utterly helpless. I would be the perfect victim, until I was not. I spent the next 48 hours in that hospital bed, floating in a sterile twilight of tests, monitors, and bland food, but my mind was not resting. It was working, analyzing, finally running the data points of my own life. While Marcus paced the hallway, taking urgent calls and accepting sympathy from nurses with a strained, brave face, I was reconstructing the last 5 years. The fog of my marriage was finally lifting, and the truth emerging in that harsh fluorescent light was monstrous. Ours was not a partnership. It was a hostile takeover, executed with kisses and false concern. I had always been the earner. My mind, my analysis, my career at AstraZeneca that paid for our spacious Denver apartment, the sleek German car he drove, the endless stream of his failed ventures. Marcus was the visionary, the entrepreneur. It started with a disastrous crypto trading bot that vaporized $20,000 of my savings. It morphed into a subscription service for bespoke shoelaces, then an app that would, supposedly, revolutionize the craft beer scene. Each one failed, spectacularly and expensively. My salary was the fuel for his delusions. When I first met him, my ambition was the thing he claimed to adore. "You're a force of nature, Ilara," he'd said. "You're going to change the world. But a force of nature cannot be controlled." So, systematically, he began the erosion. First, my friends. "They're holding you back, baby. They're just 9-to-5ers. They don't understand the kind of pressure you're under. They don't understand our ambition." Then, my family. My sister and I had been close, especially after our mother passed, but Marcus saw her as a threat. "She only ever calls when she needs money. Ilara, she's using you. Can't you see that?" He was a master of planting tiny seeds of doubt. He isolated me, slowly and expertly, until the only voice I heard was his. The only person I had left to lean on was the very man undermining me. And now, I had the Kestrel project. It was not just another assignment, it was my masterpiece. A predictive algorithm that could reshape supply chain logistics. A piece of code worth tens of millions to the right buyer. It was the project that would make my career. Marcus despised it. He scoffed at the late hours, the intensity of my focus. "You're just building someone else's empire, Ilara," he would murmur, rubbing my shoulders. His touch, which I once found soothing, now felt proprietary, like a man polishing an asset. "You should be putting that incredible brain to work for us. Quit AstraZeneca. We can build something together." I always refused. I knew together meant for him. Lying in the starchy antiseptic sheets, the accidents replayed in my mind, no longer random. The time he had tripped and spilled an entire mug of black coffee directly onto my work laptop, just 2 days before a major milestone review. The mix-up where he forgot to pay the high-speed internet bill, a bill I had automated years ago, causing me to miss a critical virtual presentation. The explosive, night-long arguments he would ignite over nothing. "Why didn't you buy the right kind of almond milk? Do you even listen to me always?" Without fail. The night before, I had to be perfectly sharp and focused. He was not just distracting me, he was actively sabotaging me. He was trying to break me, to make me fail, so that I would finally collapse into his arms and have no choice but to follow his lead. Then came the final devastating piece of data. The doctor had returned, his face puzzled. "Ilara, your tests are confusing," he said, tapping his tablet. "The TIA was clearly exacerbated by extreme stress, but your blood work shows something else. There are traces of an unprescribed anticoagulant. Have you been taking any blood thinners, warfarin?" "Perhaps." I shook my head, the motion numb. My throat closed, and I remembered. Every single morning, without fail, for the last 6 months. Marcus. He would wake up before me, and by the time I was at my desk, he would appear with a smile, holding a tall glass, his special health smoothie. "To help you with the stress, baby, keep you going." I could taste it. That faint, bitter, metallic aftertaste he always blamed on the kale or the new grass-fed whey protein he'd bought. He had been poisoning me. It was not a sudden act of malice. It was a calculated long-term strategy, a little bit every day. As the Kestrel deadline approached, as my stress levels and blood pressure naturally rose, he just increased the dosage. He wasn't trying to sabotage the project. He was trying to inherit it. He was trying to kill me, and he was using my own ambition as the trigger. I was discharged 3 days later, the diagnosis of a severe TIA hanging over me like a guillotine. The official recommendation was bed rest, followed by intensive physical therapy. My left side was still weak, my speech slurred if I didn't concentrate, and my balance was non-existent. The hospital provided a temporary wheelchair. Marcus, the devoted husband, wheeled me into our apartment. The door jamb, splintered and broken from Julian's entry, had been hastily repaired, the new wood raw and unpainted. It was a stark, physical reminder of my betrayal. The apartment, once my sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Marcus was suffocating. He treated me like a broken doll, a child. "Time for your medication, baby," he'd say, holding out the pills, making me drink in front of him. He claimed the doctor had insisted he manage my prescriptions. "Oh, your boss from AstraZeneca called," he'd mention casually. "I told him you're in no condition to speak to anyone. I'll handle all your work communications until you're better. You just need to focus on healing." He was my caretaker. He was my jailer. He answered my phone, screened my emails, and fluffed my pillows with a smile that never, ever reached his eyes. I played my part. I was the weak, confused victim. I let my head loll. I mumbled my words. I pretended to be grateful, to be terrified of my own body, and I let him believe his control was absolute. My only hope lived across the hall. Julian had been quiet. He hadn't visited the hospital again, a move I recognized as smart, tactical. He knew Marcus would be watching, The day after I returned, I checked the mail. Marcus, hovering, had grabbed it first, but I'd seen the small square box from an electronics company mixed in with the junk. That evening, I fell asleep on the living room sofa, my breathing deep and rhythmic. I heard Marcus go into his office, the door clicking shut. He was probably on another important call. I waited 5 full minutes, then slipped my good hand into my purse, which was on the floor beside me. My fingers closed around the small notepad and pen Julian had given me. I had kept them hidden. The night before, while Marcus slept, I had written a single word mailbox. The next day, I insisted on getting the mail myself. I need to do something, I slurred, making a pathetic attempt to push my wheelchair. Marcus sighed. A put-upon martyr. Fine, Alara, but just to the hall and back. Don't overdo it. He watched me from the doorway. I wheeled myself to the bank of mailboxes, my fingers clumsy with the key. I pulled out the bundle of circulars, and underneath them, stuck to the back of the metal box, was a small, black object held by magnets, a burner phone, simple, prepaid, and according to the tiny note wrapped around it, encrypted. I hid it in the folds of the blanket on my lap. That night, I waited again. The house was dark, Marcus's breathing a low rumble from our bedroom. I was in the guest room, more comfortable for my recovery. He'd said. I pulled out the phone. It powered on silently. There was one contact. J. I typed, my right thumb moving slowly. I'm in. He's controlling everything. Pills. My phone. The reply came almost instantly. I know. I've been watching. He hasn't left the apartment for more than 30 minutes since you got back. We need eyes inside. How I'm a security designer. Alara. This is what I do. Tomorrow, at 10 a.m. He has a scheduled haircut. I know because I heard him make the appointment. It's the only thing he's booked for himself. It gives us a window. He'll lock me in. No, he won't. He thinks you're helpless. He'll just leave. Be by the door at 10:05. The next morning, Marcus fussed over me, leaving me a glass of water which I didn't touch and his health smoothie which sat beside it like a glass of neon green poison. I have to run out for a bit, baby, he said, kissing my forehead. My first chance to breathe in a week. You'll be okay for an hour, right? Just rest. The moment the door locked, I was in my chair, at 5 minutes past 10. Exactly. There was a soft, precise knock. I wheeled over and unlocked it. Julian slipped inside, carrying a small toolbox. He was all business. Living room and your office, where he worked with incredible speed. The cameras were tiny, no bigger than a shirt button. One went into the spine of a book on the main shelf, its lens aimed at the sofa and kitchen entrance. The second he installed in my office, hidden inside a defunct smoke detector on the wall, giving a perfect view of my desk and computer. They're motion-activated and feed to a secure cloud-based server, he whispered, packing his tools. Only I have the key. He won't find them. As he was about to leave, I grabbed his arm. I pointed to the smoothie. Test it. I typed on my own phone's notepad. Please. Julian nodded grimly. He pulled a small vial and a syringe from his kit, drew a sample, and tucked it away. I've also been looking into him, he said, his voice low. Your husband isn't just a failed entrepreneur. He's in debt. Serious debt. Over $100,000 in high-interest loans. And he's not just talking to himself in that office. My blood went cold. He has a mistress. He calls her multiple times a day. He's telling her everything. A mistress. It was a sickening, banal, and yet perfectly logical piece of the puzzle. He wasn't just trying to kill me for my project. He was trying to kill me for her. Julian was at the door. He paused, his hand on the knob. Alara, you need to understand. The smoothie test will take a day or two, but it doesn't matter what it says. We already know the truth. He looked at me, his gaze unblinking. If he's willing to do this, If he's actively poisoning you and has another woman waiting, he will not stop. He will find another way. A pillow over your face, a faked accident in the bathroom. He's going to finish the job. You need an exit plan, not just for leaving, but for destroying him. The text message from Julian arrived on the burner phone 2 nights later. It was just one line. Lab results are in. Positive for warfarin. Unstable dosage. It's exactly what you thought. I stared at the glowing green text in the dark of my guest room. It was one thing to suspect, to piece together the logic of it. It was another to see the clinical proof. He had been slowly, methodically, poisoning me. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from the residual weakness of the stroke. It was rage. A cold, clean, focused rage that burned away the last of my fear. I had work to do. I waited until I heard the deep, rhythmic snoring from Marcus in the master bedroom. He was sleeping soundly, the sleep of a man who believes he has gotten away with everything. I quietly pushed myself up. My left leg was still unreliable, a frustrating dead weight, but I could stand. I leaned heavily on the wheelchair and maneuvered myself into it, my movements muffled by the carpet. I wheeled myself into my office, the chair gliding silently, and closed the door, leaving only a tiny crack. The room was dark, lit only by the faint blue glow of my monitor's sleep light. I powered it on, the sudden brightness making me wince. I logged in, my fingers, clumsy on the right hand, slow on the left, typed my credentials. While the system loaded, I pulled out the burner phone and navigated to the secure server address Julian had set up. The 2 camera feeds loaded. One showed the living room, dark and empty. The other showed me, a ghostly figure in the wheelchair, illuminated by the screen. First, the project files. I was a data analyst. Logs were my native language. I went deep into the server, checking the access history for the Kestrel project folder. There it was, an external access protocol, an IP address I didn't recognize, and the timestamps. The first one was the night I was in the emergency room. The second was the following night, while I was heavily sedated. And a third, just yesterday afternoon, during the 2 hours I was at my first physical therapy appointment. He had been in here. He had been on my machine. I opened the camera feed log for the office, winding it back to the previous afternoon. I watched the footage speed up, then slowed it down as the timestamp approached. The door opened. It was Marcus. He looked over his shoulder, ensuring I was gone. He walked to my desk, pulled a small USB drive from his pocket, and plugged it into my docking station. He was clumsy, clicking around my desktop for almost a minute before he found the Kestrel directory. He highlighted the entire folder, dragged it, copied it. The progress bar was a small, glowing blue line on the screen. While it copied, he was on his phone. I turned up the volume on the burner, straining to hear. "I'm getting it now," he whispered, his voice sharp with excitement. "Yes, the whole thing. Kestrel. Every last file." He paused, listening. A woman's voice replied, but it was too tinny, too muffled. "No, she's at that stupid therapy," Marcus said. "She can barely lift her own head. Lara, she's not a problem. She's a vegetable." My blood stopped. "Lara," he continued. "She's been slurring her words, just like we hoped. Even if she recovers, no one will ever believe her. By the time she can form a coherent sentence, we'll be gone, and AstraZeneca will be blaming her for the biggest corporate espionage case in this state's history. It's perfect." The woman's voice came through again, clearer this time, sharper. "Don't get cocky. Marcus, get the files, get out of that office, and wipe the USB's trace from the system. I sent you the utility for it. Use it, and bring me the drive tonight." I knew that voice. It was not just any Lara. It was my Lara. Lara Jensen, my personal attorney. The woman I had hired 3 years ago to manage my estate. The woman who had advised me on my AstraZeneca contract. The woman who, just 6 months ago, had helped me update my will. The pieces slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a desperate man in debt. This was a sophisticated, two-pronged attack. Marcus, the inside man, administering the poison and playing the part of the grieving husband. Lara, the architect, providing the legal framework, the technical know-how, and, no doubt, the connection to the buyer. They were going to sell Kestrel, my work. They were going to sell it to NetCorp, AstraZeneca's most vicious competitor. Lara would know exactly who to approach, exactly how to structure the deal to make it look legitimate, at least for a few days. And me, I was the fall guy. The disgraced, unstable analyst who cracked under the pressure, stole her own multi-million-dollar project, and then conveniently suffered a debilitating stroke that silenced her. It was brilliant. I watched Marcus on the camera feed as he finished the copy, ran the small utility program Lara had sent him, a laughably simple cache cleaner that would never fool a real forensic team, and then pulled the drive. He pocketed it, a small, triumphant smile on his face. I thought of the document sitting in a safe deposit box downtown, my last will and testament, drafted by Lara, signed by me. In the event of my death or incapacitation, it named a single sole beneficiary for all my personal assets and intellectual property not explicitly owned by my employer, my loving husband, Marcus. Running was not an option. Fleeing in a wheelchair, presenting myself to the world as a confused stroke victim, would only validate the narrative they were building. It would make me the unstable employee who cracked under pressure and sold out her company. No. They didn't just try to steal my project, they tried to steal my life and my reputation. I wasn't going to survive. I was going to hunt. Marcus thought I was a vegetable. He was about to find out just how venomous a vegetable could be. That night, locked in the guest room, I used the burner phone. This is Ilara, code Kestrel. I am the victim of an attempted murder and active corporate espionage. My husband, Marcus, and my personal attorney, Lara Jensen, are involved. They have stolen a copy of the project. I am not safe. I need help. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the send button. It felt insane. I pressed it. The reply came in less than 15 minutes. We believe you. Ilara, your access logs showed anomalies we couldn't explain. We are assigning a covert team. Do not engage. Await instructions. We will protect our asset. I was an asset. That cold corporate word was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I wasn't just Ilara, the broken wife. I was Kestrel, a multi-million-dollar project they would not let go of. For the first time in days, I was not alone. My new, invisible allies at AstraZeneca gave me a mission. Keep playing the part. My physical therapy became a public performance. I practiced my weakness. In front of Marcus, I let my left hand droop uselessly. I struggled to hold a spoon, my frustration seeming to mount. I slurred my words just enough, a thick, pitiful mumble that made Marcus sigh with impatience when he thought I wasn't looking. Julian, looped in through the burner phone, became my guard. He would check in, bringing mail or just knocking, forcing Marcus to acknowledge his presence. He was a constant physical reminder that I had someone on the outside, a variable Marcus couldn't control, which kept me safe from any sudden accidents. But while my body was a model of pathetic recovery, my mind, fueled by cold fury and secure instructions from the AstraZeneca team, was operating at 110%. I told Marcus I needed to fix my project. I framed it as a desperate attempt to hold on to my job, my identity. They think I am broken, I told him, weeping. I have to show them. He, of course, encouraged it. He probably imagined me corrupting the files further, making his theft even easier. I spent hours at my desk. The AstraZeneca team had confirmed they had the true, secure version of Kestrel locked down. My job was to build the bait. I created a masterpiece of deception. From the outside, it was Kestrel. Every module present, every line of code elegant and functional. It looked perfect. but buried deep in the primary execution algorithm. I planted the bomb my team had designed, a kill switch. The moment anyone tried to compile or run the main executable, it wouldn't just fail. It would trigger a catastrophic data corruption routine, a digital virus designed to spread to every directory it could access, rendering the host system a useless brick. I needed to make sure Marcus saw me save it. I left the burner phone on, the camera feed showing the hallway. When I saw him approach, I started struggling with the keyboard, my left hand slipping pathetically off the keys. He came in, watching over my shoulder. Almost done, I mumbled, acting exhausted. He watched as I navigated, with agonizing slowness, to the main drive. I saved the new, poisoned project, overwriting the old one. I named it Kestrel Final V2 Complete. His eyes glistened. He thought I was wrapping it up with a bow for him. There was one last piece of the performance. I had to make Marcus complacent. He was still wary of Julian. It was time to remove that threat. We staged it in the hallway, right by the splintered door jamb. I knew Marcus was in his office, the door ajar, listening. Julian knocked. "Just checking in. Ilara, brought you some mail." I wheeled myself to the door, my face a mask of rage. "Get out!" I shouted, forcing the slur, making the words thick and uneven. You think I am stupid. You think I am weak." "Ilara, I was just trying to help," Julian said, playing his part perfectly, his voice full of concern. "Help." I threw the small notepad he had given me at his feet. "You look at me like I am broken. I trust Marcus. My husband. He takes care of me, not you. Go away. Leave me alone." I slammed the door in his face. It was a magnificent, heartbreaking performance. I wheeled myself back to the living room and put on a show of sobbing into my hands, my shoulders shaking. Later that night, I watched the camera feed. Marcus emerged from his office, a triumphant smile on his face. He picked up his phone. He was whispering. "It's perfect," he said, his voice low and confident. "She just kicked the neighbor out. A huge, screaming fight. She's completely isolated, thinks I'm her white knight. Yeah, she trusts me. She's even been trying to fix the Kestrel files. She just saved a new version, probably the only clean one. Of course, it's ours. She's lost. Lara. She has no one left but me." He hung up. He looked over at me, asleep on the sofa, his gaze cold and devoid of any emotion. He was a predator who thought his prey had finally, truly, given up the fight. He had no idea the trap was set. The burner phone buzzed, a silent vibration against my ribs. It was a text from the AstraZeneca security team. "We have confirmation. Lara Jensen contacted NetCorp's internal acquisitions team 2 days ago. She used her credentials as your legal counsel, claiming you were incapacitated and she was acting as executor of your estate to liquidate your primary intellectual asset. They've scheduled a high-priority meeting. She's moving fast. Ilara. We are engaging NetCorp leadership now. They are receptive. They were receptive. My enemies were inadvertently building my army. While AstraZeneca worked the corporate angle, Julian worked the personal. My assets were still dangerously exposed, all legally accessible to Marcus. I needed to vanish, financially. While Marcus was out on one of his long, mysterious errands, Julian slipped into the apartment. He wasn't the concerned neighbor anymore. He was the ex-firefighter, the security professional. "We don't have time for a bank," he said, handing me a secure laptop and a small hardware key. I used my contacts to establish an offshore blind trust. Your name is nowhere near it. It's just a string of numbers. You need to start moving everything, right now. While I pretended to be napping, I was a flurry of digital activity. I was in my element. I liquidated stock options. I drained high-yield savings accounts. I transferred the entire contents of my joint checking, leaving Marcus just enough to buy groceries. It was a digital exodus. Within 2 hours, over $900,000. Everything I had earned, everything he was trying to steal, vanished into the ether, safe behind a wall of encryption. My old life was now a hollowed-out shell. Now it was time to set the final piece of bait. That evening, I wheeled myself into the living room, my face a mask of exhausted concentration. Marcus was on the sofa, scrolling through his phone. "Marcus," I said, my voice intentionally thick. He grunted, not looking up. I did it," I whispered, injecting a note of fragile triumph. He finally looked up, his eyes narrow. "Did what?" "Kestrel. I finished it. I fixed the code. The bugs from before. It's done." I let my head drop as if the admission had taken all my energy. I have to present it. My boss said, Friday morning, 10 o'clock, or I am fired." I watched him. It was like watching a shark smell blood in the water. His entire posture shifted. The bored indifference evaporated, replaced by a sharp, electric focus. He put his phone down. "Baby, that's—" He rushed over, kneeling by my wheelchair, grasping my good hand. His was cold. "That's incredible, Ilara. I knew you could do it. I am so proud of you." He was practically vibrating with greed. "I am so tired," I mumbled. "You should be," he said, his voice a soothing, treacherous balm. "You rest. You've earned it." He tucked me into bed in the guest room, but I knew he wouldn't be sleeping. I was on the burner phone, monitoring the living room camera. He was pacing, talking to Lara. "Friday. She's presenting to AstraZeneca at 10. This is it. It's our only window." "Yes. We have to move tonight. It's the only way. Don't worry about her. I'll handle Ilara. She won't make it to any presentation. Just be ready." Thursday. The day before the presentation. I knew it would be tonight. My heart was a cold, hard knot in my chest. I spent the day preparing. When Marcus went out to pick up my prescriptions, I used my still weak left leg to force myself to stand, clinging to the kitchen counter. I made my own smoothie spinach and tap water. It was disgusting, but it looked the part. I poured it into an identical glass to the one he always used and hid it in the back of the mini fridge in my office, behind a stack of old hard drives. He was disgustingly attentive that evening. He made dinner. He fluffed my pillows. At 9 p.m., he came into the guest room, a warm, false smile on his face. "You look stressed, baby," he said, stroking my hair. "You've worked so hard. You deserve a celebration for finishing Kestrel." I watched as he went to the kitchen. I heard the blender. It whirred for much longer than usual, a high-pitched, grinding sound. He was making sure the dose was lethal, that it was completely pulverized. He returned, holding the tall glass of pale green liquid. It looked thicker than usual. "To Kestrel," he said, his eyes glittering. I took the glass, my hand trembling from the stroke's supposed weakness. I brought it halfway to my lips and stopped. "Oh, Marcus," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I am so cold. Can you get my heavy blanket, the one in the closet?" I saw a flash of pure annoyance. He wanted to see me drink it. "Ilara, just, please," I begged, letting a tear roll down my cheek. "I am freezing." He let out a heavy, martyred sigh. "Fine." The second he turned his back and walked into the master bedroom, I moved. I wheeled my chair, a single, silent push, to my office. I opened the fridge, grabbed the safe glass, and wheeled back. The entire swap took less than 4 seconds. I hid the poisoned glass, the one containing enough warfarin to kill a horse, behind the curtain. When he returned, blanket in hand, I was holding the glass of spinach water. He watched me, his gaze intense. I raised the glass and drank it all, forcing myself to swallow the gritty, metallic water. "All gone," I mumbled, handing him the empty glass. His smile was genuine. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "Good girl. You just rest now. You have a big day tomorrow. I waited. 20 minutes. The adrenaline in my system was so potent I was afraid my faked symptoms wouldn't be believable. I lay in bed, my eyes open in the dark. Then, I began. I let out a low gasp. My right hand, my good hand, began to twitch. I let the empty water glass on my nightstand fall, shattering on the hardwood floor. Marcus. I gasped. He was at the door in an instant. I let my head fall back against the pillow. I arched my back, my eyes rolling, and let my entire body convulse, a terrible jerking motion. I bit my own tongue, the coppery taste of blood filling my mouth. Then, I went completely, utterly limp. I forced my breathing to become shallow, almost imperceptible. I heard him step closer. He didn't call my name. He didn't rush to the phone. He stood over me, in the dark, for a full minute. Then, I felt his fingers on my neck, not checking for a pulse, but just feeling my skin. Finally, he whispered to himself. He pulled out his phone. I heard the clicks of him dialing. "It's done," he said, his voice calm, flat. "A massive one this time. No, she's gone. She won't be waking up tomorrow. No, I'm not calling 911. Not yet. I'll find her in the morning. It's more tragic that way." He paused, listening to Lara. "Right. The file. Kestrel Final V2 complete. It's on her desktop. She was so proud of it. The door is unlocked. I'll be in the living room, establishing my grief. Come now. Get the drive." He hung up. I heard him walk away. I lay perfectly still, the taste of my own blood on my tongue. 10 minutes later, the burner phone in the pocket of my pajamas vibrated. A text from Julian, watching the feeds. "She's in the elevator." I opened my eyes. Just a slit. Through the crack in the guest room door. I watched the main camera feed on my phone. The front door opened. Lara Jensen. She was dressed in a sharp, dark business suit, carrying a leather briefcase. She didn't even glance toward the guest room. She stepped right past me, a dead woman, and walked directly into my office. The office camera feed clicked on. I watched, my heart pounding, as she booted my machine, plugged in a sleek silver USB drive, and navigated to my desktop. She found the file, Kestrel Final V2 complete. She dragged it, copied it. She pulled the drive, tucked it into her briefcase, and walked out. She never looked back. She quietly closed the front door behind her. The trap was sprung. Friday morning, 10 o'clock sharp. I was not in that hotel conference room near the Denver airport. I was 2 miles away, in a secure operations center at AstraZeneca headquarters, sitting in a high-backed leather chair. But I was watching. My security team had 3 separate, high-definition camera feeds running, piping audio directly into my headset. I saw and heard everything. I watched them walk in. They looked powerful. Lara wore a graphite gray suit that was a kind of armor, her dark hair pulled back. Marcus wore his best, a navy blue knockoff that looked passable from a distance. He was vibrating with a smug energy, the idiot who thought he'd just won the lottery. They were royalty, arriving to claim their kingdom. The NetCorp executives were already seated, looking impatient, their coffee untouched. Lara took the floor. She was smooth, her voice like oiled steel, as she passed out leather-bound folders. "Gentlemen, thank you for your discretion. We are here to facilitate an asset transfer. Given my client, Ms. Vance's unfortunate and sudden medical incapacitation, her full executory powers have been transferred to her husband, Mr. Vance." She slid the forged documents across the table. My signature, flawlessly copied. "He holds full and unencumbered rights to all intellectual property not yet formally integrated into AstraZeneca's core systems." Then it was Marcus's turn. He stood, and I had to close my eyes for a second, the sight of his proud, triumphant face making me physically ill. He plugged in the silver USB drive. My bait. My bomb. "What Lara is saying," he began, his voice dripping with a nauseating false humility. Is that Ilara was a brilliant theorist, but she hit a wall. For the last 8 months, I have been the primary developer. I was the one who rebuilt the Kestrel architecture from the ground up. I listened, my fingers gripping the arms of my chair as he presented my slides, my architecture, my data models. I am the one who optimized the algorithm, he said, pointing to my code. I boosted its efficiency by over 40%. What you are buying today, gentlemen, is my innovation, my work. He was in the middle of a grand, sweeping gesture, talking about the future of logistics, when the main conference room door swung open. Marcus froze, his hand still in the air. Lara spun around, her face instantly hardening, expecting a hotel manager, an interruption. She did not expect Ann Fulton, my CEO at AstraZeneca. Ann walked in, and she was not alone. Flanking her was David Chen, the CEO of NetCorp, the very man they were pitching. His face was thunderous. The air vacuumed out of the room. I watched the color drain from Marcus's face, leaving a sick, pale greenish tint. He looked like a child caught setting a fire. Lara's eyes darted between the two CEOs, her mind, for the first time in her life, not calculating an angle, but desperately searching for an exit. Anne, Lara said, her voice a fraction thinner. David, what a... surprise. I was just representing my client's interests. Shut up, Lara, Anne snapped. It was not a request. David Chen spoke, his voice a low growl that filled the sterile room. Ms. Jensen, did you really think we were that stupid? I don't know what you mean, Lara said, her hands moving to close her laptop. This is a legitimate presentation. When you approached my acquisitions team 2 weeks ago, David continued, claiming this asset was orphaned by an incapacitated analyst, you made 2 profound errors. First, you assumed we wouldn't immediately contact AstraZeneca to verify the status of their top asset. Second, and here he gestured to Anne, you underestimated our mutual interest in cleaning house. We don't buy stolen data, Ms. Jensen, especially not from a corrupt lawyer who, we discovered, was also planning to use our offer to blackmail AstraZeneca into buying back their own property. Anne stepped forward. We were never interested in your data, Mr. Vance. We were never interested in this meeting. We were interested in you. Marcus was a statue. He looked at Lara, his mouth opening and closing silently, the realization dawning that he was nothing but a pawn, a useful idiot. Lara snapped her briefcase shut. This meeting is over. You have no legal basis to detain. We have conspiracy to commit fraud, Anne said, her voice sharp. We have attempted industrial espionage, and, in the case of your partner, we have quite a bit more. Lara just stared, her mask of professionalism finally, completely shattered. Marcus, his face white, his suit suddenly looking cheap and oversized, simply folded. He didn't faint, he just crumpled, his legs giving out, and slid from his chair to the floor in a pathetic heap. The conference room door opened again. This time, it was not a CEO. It was not security. It was me. I had spent the last hour in an adjacent suite, watching the feed, getting my strength back. I was not in the pajamas they expected to find my corpse in. I was in a dark blue power suit, my hair pulled back, my heels clicking decisively on the floor. I was not in a wheelchair. I stood tall, my left side imperfect, but strong. Lara's head snapped toward me, her face, which had already been pale, turning a ghastly shade of gray. It was the look of a person seeing a ghost. Marcus, still a heap on the floor, looked up. The blood drained from his face as his mind tried to process the impossible. He looked from me to the CEOs and back again, his terror palpable. I walked past the executives, my steps steady, and stopped directly in front of the man I had married. I looked down at him. You forgot one crucial variable. Marcus, I said. My voice was not the slurred, pained mumble he was used to. It was clear, cold, and amplified by the silence of the room. He flinched. You thought I was weak. You thought I was breaking down from the stress of the project. You were wrong. I looked at Lara, then back at him. I was not weak from stress. I was weak from you. I placed a thin black hard drive on the polished table. You were right about one thing. I was incapacitated, but I was never unconscious. I was documenting. I nodded to the AstraZeneca team. The main monitor they had been using for their presentation flickered. A toxicology report appeared, stark in black and white. This is the analysis of the celebration smoothie you gave me last night, the one I swapped out while you fetched a blanket. The dosage of warfarin was, and I quote the lab, catastrophically lethal. Marcus made a small, choking sound. The screen changed. It was a waveform, an audio file. This, I said, is the audio recording, legally obtained in my own home, of your phone call with Lara, planning to handle me so I wouldn't make it to this presentation. Lara, finally finding her voice, lunged forward. This is inadmissible. You cannot use this. My conversations, my actions, they are all protected by attorney-client privilege. This is a complete violation. Ann Fulton, my CEO, laughed. It was a cold, sharp, brutal sound. Privilege, Ann said, stepping forward. That privilege ends the moment you conspire to commit a felony. Lara, and it most certainly ends when you are no longer an attorney. Lara froze. We filed an emergency motion with the Bar Association at 8:15 this morning. Anne continued. We presented them with the evidence of your conspiracy, your attempted fraud against two separate corporations, and your coercion of your client. Your license to practice law in the state of Colorado was summarily revoked at 8:30 a.m. You are done. Lara didn't speak. She just stared, her entire world collapsing. But Marcus, he had no professional mask to hide behind. He had no intellect, no strategy. He only had rage. He looked at me, at the woman who had survived, at the woman who had just taken everything. He scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of purple fury, his eyes bulging. You bitch! He screamed, and he lunged at me. He didn't make it 2 steps. The conference room door opened a final time. Julian stepped inside, flanked by 2 members of AstraZeneca's internal security team. He had been waiting outside for this exact moment. He moved with the fluid grace of a man who understood violence, intercepting Marcus mid-air. It was not a fight. It was a containment. He slammed Marcus against the wall, his arm pressed firmly against his throat. No, Julian said, his voice deadly calm. 2 uniformed Denver police officers who had been waiting with Julian stepped in behind him, the room filled with the cold authority of the law. Marcus Vance, one officer said, pulling out handcuffs as Julian released him. You are under arrest for attempted murder in the 1st degree, conspiracy to commit fraud, and theft of trade secrets. The officer then turned to Lara, who stood like a statue of ice, her hands gripping her briefcase. Lara Jensen, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, industrial espionage, and being an accessory to attempted murder. She did not resist. She just let the expensive leather briefcase fall from her hand, its contents spilling onto the carpet as the officer cuffed her. Marcus was sobbing, a high-pitched, ugly, animal sound, as they led him away. The room was suddenly, blessedly quiet. I straightened my suit jacket. I turned to the stunned executives from both companies. Ms. Fulton, Mr. Chen, the real Kestrel project is secure on AstraZeneca's internal servers. It was never compromised. The file on that USB. I nodded to the drive Lara had plugged in. Is a kill switch I designed. It would have wiped their entire system. I looked at my CEO. We will be ready to launch in the 4th quarter, ahead of schedule. The scene did not end in that sterile room. It ended 10 minutes later, out on the curb, after I had given my statement. Julian waited for me, standing by the hotel's main entrance. The sirens had faded. I walked out into the sharp, bright, cold Denver morning. The air was so clean it almost hurt to breathe. I stopped and looked at the skyline, at the mountains in the distance. Julian came to stand beside me. "So," he asked, his voice quiet, "where will you go now, Ilara?" I thought of the dark apartment, the poisoned smoothies, the silent phone. I thought of the man who had seen me as a resource to be drained and a problem to be deleted. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the first truly free breath I had taken in 5 years, and I smiled. "Anywhere," I said. "Anywhere I want." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would absolutely love to know where in the world you are listening from. Please comment below and let's connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, give this video a like, and you can support us even more by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.